Welcome back to Mossy Sales, and after an amazing weekend for Luna Rossa and an awful one for Ineos Team UK, I thought it'd be good just to cover what I think is still quite a tight match and how Ineos could still take race wins in this matchup. I've seen quite a lot of comments of very confident Luna Rossa fans and quite a lot of dismay amongst the Ineos fans. I don't think it's actually so far in Luna Rossa's favour as one might expect. And equally for those in Ineos who are writing off their own team, again, I don't think things are actually too bad. I'm going to highlight a few of the reasons why. Both boats have improved, but I don't think it's that Luna Rossa are now dramatically better. There was nothing we could conclude from the previous racing which said Ineos were miles better. And looking at the racing now, I think the situation is still the same. We never had any real light wind racing between them in the round robins. They didn't meet up on that kind of marginal foiling day. And we suspected Luna Rossa would be better in the light winds, and they just hands down were better in the first race of the final. The second race, I think the boats would have been a lot closer. There was a slight edge to Luna Rossa there, which was undeniable. But Ineos had the wrong head sail on. They were down to J2, and it got up to 17 knots in that race, started at 12 knots. I think even at 12 knots, they should be on their third jib down, like Luna Rossa were. So, yes, Luna Rossa had an advantage in that race, but I think it was down to equipment choice rather than a drastic kind of inherent advantage with the platform they've got. So let's fast forward to, I think, what is the most interesting situation. And before we get into this, let's just clear a few things up about how you describe a fast boat, because it's quite an interesting situation. What counts in these races is velocity made good, how quickly you get around the course. Now this can be broken down into like a number of subcomponents, which is important when you're going to discuss where boats are quick and where they're making gains. So one thing about velocity made good is just the wind pressure and direction. So you're going to get around a course faster if you sail less distance and you sail it in better pressure. So when you're comparing two boats, that's really the strategy and tactics of the people on board rather than an inherent characteristic of the boat they're sailing. Secondly, you have their kind of like their straight line speed, and this, I take out tacks, any gains and losses in tacks, just when they're on a tack or on a jibe downwind, in the same pressure, everything else equal, how quick is that boat at getting upwind, or how quick is that boat at getting downwind? So not straight line speed as in a straight line, but when they're going in a straight line, their speed to windward or speed to leeward. So quite an important kind of distinguishing point to make. So when you look at the VMG for a whole leg, that'll tell you the overall picture of who was better on that leg, but it won't separate it out into these kind of little bits of character. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I think Ineos actually are as fast as Luna Rossa, above 12 knots, or maybe they are still slightly faster. But the difference is, and I've covered this in the weekend review when we talked about the tacking, Luna Rossa's tacks are much better. They're gaining like 15-20 meters every tack, and if Ineos have a speed advantage, it is tiny. It's in the order of 10 meters per the whole kind of tack across a course. So Luna Rossa are going to do well there. So let's have a look at what happens in racing. So first of all, Ineos lose the start, and this is disastrous for Ineos, because if you're up against a boat which has better tacking than you, these courses are super narrow, so it's really easy to force someone into a tacking duel. If this course had no boundaries, looking at race 19 now, see them come off the start and look at the distance between the boats. I'll make it full screen. Look at the distance between the boats. They come off the line. It's about 60 metres. And Ineos actually close it down before the tack to about 50 metres. So they've gained about 10 metres. Then they go through the tack. Luna Rossa stretch it out. It closes back down again. Looks like Ineos have got good legs. Then they tack. Luna Rossa extends again. And you can see the pattern here. And this is why it's so important for Ineos not to lose starts. And I choose my words carefully there, not to lose them. Eventually, Luna Rossa force Ineos into an extra tack. From then on, it's a close race, but Ineos never really get into it. There is one moment on the second leeward mark where Luna Rossa have like a 250 metre lead, and they go for a JK and they lose like about 130 metres of lead. And that keeps the race quite close. Again, Ineos, look at them in a straight line, same pressure. Ineos are always kind of gaining towards this boundary, but the boundary just comes too quickly. And after the tacks, Luna Rossa have stretched it out again. And they enter this tacking duel. And again, in the tacking duel, it stretches out. By the top of the course, the tacking duel, they've kind of got back up to 120 metres lead. So what does this mean for the tactics of Ineos? Well, if your boat's slow in a tacking duel, the other team can only engage in a tacking duel if they're ahead. So if you're equal, you can bounce off each other, but only when they're on starboard. So you just want to deny Luna Rossa the opportunity of starting up a tacking duel. And the ways you can do that is A, not be behind at the start. And that's easier said than done. But if I was Ineos Team UK, I'd be looking for neutral starts rather than attacking for a slam dunk, hook, penalty, a lockout at the start. Any of that sort of stuff. You know, it's high risks. If you come out on the backside of that on a behind, then that gives Luna Rossa the opportunity to start a tacking duel. And that's where Luna Rossa have really got a big advantage. If they're pulling out 20 metres every tack on you, then you just can't let them get an attacking duel. The second thing you can do is when you are getting an even start with them, you always want to be the right-hand boat of the two. And we saw this in the second race of the round robins. Ineos are the right-hand boat. And this means even though they get squeezed out by Luna Rossa's ability to sail a high lane, but then they're coming back with starboard advantage, and Luna Rossa have to do a big duck. An even start with the right-hand side of the course would stop Luna Rossa engaging you in attacking duel. And that's got to be Ineos's biggest strategy, really. Not trying to win the start, but just trying to not lose it. And then, if possible, being the windward boat, so that if you do get squeezed out by Luna Rossa's high lane, then you can tack out and keep hold of that starboard advantage. And this is why, in my opinion, it was such a mistake to go for that hook. Not because Ben missed a hook, we can all make mistakes, that's fine. But because really, it wasn't in his interest to go for the hook anyway. It wasn't a risk he needed to take. He would have always been better just pushing Luna Rossa a little bit towards the port end so he could set up on the hip with the ability to tack out if Luna Rossa went into their high mode. Now, here is the rookie mistake. And if you're listening, Giles, this is apparent wind sailing 101. Downwind, sail the long jibe first. Now, I think the problem with match racing is you can get a little bit distracted of always looking for a split. But there's no point splitting from people if the split is just a terrible direction. In the second race, what happened, the wind had swung right. So we're looking at the windward mark. The wind had swung right, which means this left-hand mark is much further downwind. So you're always going to have to go to this left-hand windward mark. And similarly, the leeward marks, this right-hand leeward mark, or the port-hand mark, is always going to be further upwind because the wind's gone right. So in this last race, they're really restricted. They basically have to go around the same 2 marks. Now, Luna Rossa don't bear away jibe, they just go straight, and Ineos do a quick jibe after the mark. And you'll notice they're about 250 metres behind when they go into the jibe. Ineos you can just see them hook into, straight away after this jibe, hook into this pressure, whereas Luna Rossa come out the jibe and they do this big sweeping arc, and it's not until they get to further down the course that they pick up the same pressure as Ineos. Ineos are coming from behind with better pressure, and this is an interesting one because pressure doesn't always just move down the course. And similarly, these apparent wind boats, you might think, well, they're just sailing into the same pressure. It's like, well, actually, the wind's kind of like a 3D nature. Sometimes you have gusts which do just travel down the course and they move in the direction that, you know, that correlates with their speed and direction in terms of what you feel with wind. But breeze can be very turbulent as well. It can kind of funnel down little pockets, be rolling, can be going down, hitting the water, have a gust on the water, and then it breaks and comes back up into the air column. Now, what we see on this race course is exactly that happening. There's extra wind on the right hand side, but it's actually it's a shift as well. It's right hand pressure, but it's never getting across the course. So if you sail out to this left hand side, especially downwind, you're just sailing out of the pressure. Also, the course is very heavily skewed, so the port jibe is the long jibe by far. So you always want to jibe onto that port jibe as soon as possible. And you see they go from about 250 meters behind, and they close right up by the bottom to like 120 from doing this early jibe. And this keeps the pressure on. They lose out on the next beat. Look, Luna Rossa's always bouncing them off to this unfavoured left-hand side of the course. Now, Ineos make this mistake twice now, go around the 1 mark, and they're desperate now to create some sort of leverage on Ineos. But there's no point creating leverage when you're creating it in the wrong direction. Ineos here are going out to the unfavoured side of the course. They're going away from this big right-hand shift, which is, I mean, it allows Luna Rossa to almost make the Leeward Gate in one. And Ineos are just sailing away from that pressure, hoping that a miracle will happen. Well, first of all, you can't really create much leverage by sailing the short tack first. As soon as you sailed that short tack, that short jibe, you kind of run out of tactical options. There's not much else you can do. And we see them come down this run and things change. This breeze comes in even more from the right. Look at Luna Rossa's track here, going in a straight line. They get that new pressure, they bear away in it, and it takes quite a long time. Look at Ineos, and it's only now, much later, that Ineos get that same pressure as Luna Rossa because they jibed early. And look, the lead is stretched out to 480 meters, I think, at the most, something like that, 450 meters, whereas at the top mark, you know, it was only 300. So the lead's doubled from Ineos kind of creating leverage where it's super risky. You know, it's all about when to split and when to stick. And again, they do the JK really well executed there. But again, they're going out to the wrong side of the course. And you can see going up this this last beat, Luna Rossa in this right-hand pressure, which never really makes it across the course. Look at Luna Rossa's track. They stay lifted the whole way, whereas Ineos are being headed off, sailing into just a different type of pressure. And they lose even more. Even on the last leg, 600 meters behind, Ineos, to be honest, by this point it is all over. But Ineos are still making the same mistake, going over to that side of the course. And yeah, again, they lose out. I think for Ineos, they need to look at what Luna Rossa are doing with their boards and the tack and the timing of that. Because whilst Ineos can't make any kind of structural physical changes to the boat because of the measurement rule, what they can do is change the programming of the software. So if it is something that Ineos can figure out, I think that foil raise and drop to improve their tacks, potentially we could see an improvement there. And especially now with a longer break, they can go out, test those ideas, and potentially see some gains. But really, on the strategy front, I think Ineos just need to understand when they need to be the aggressor in the start and when they need to just settle for equal starts. Yeah, sure, when it's light winds and you think Luna Rossa has a big speed advantage, then yeah, be aggressive there, go for the slam dunk. But over 12 knots, really, Ineos should be aiming for even starts, not engaging. If anything, they should desire to be the windward boat. Then if they tack out, they retain that starboard advantage. The risk of losing a start against Luna Rossa is much greater because of their superior tacking ability. And once they're ahead, that enables them to initiate a tacking duel. And Ineos are just always going to be hammered on tacking duels. Conversely, Luna Rossa, they want to be aggressive in the pre-starts, force Ineos into losing some starts, and wherever possible, Luna Rossa should look to be that right-hand boat so they can have starboard advantage and initiate as many tacking duels as possible. Test out Ineos Team UK, see if they're really making improvements in the tacks, and take it from there. Thanks.